Hello everyone! Today I will be featuring the Montpelier, which is a tier 8 American cruiser, even though the name is of course very French. Now, I could make some big deal about this being a new premium, but honestly this is basically a Cleveland, and it's hard to treat it as any other way. Instead of having 36.9k health like the Cleveland has, this thing has 37.5, and instead of having a 6.5 second reload of the Cleveland, this thing has a 7 second reload, so half a second longer reload. In return though, it has a 2.15 Sigma instead of Cleveland's 2.0. So essentially you're trading half a second of reload for slightly better dispersion. The half second reload I feel is a bit more noticeable than the increase in dispersion. In this game in particular, I'm actually not even running the AA module, the 500,000 AA module that I highly recommend on cruisers. I'm actually running the dispersion just to see what kind of super dispersion we can get, but considering the Cleveland is already a very accurate HE spammer, like all light cruisers are very accurate, it's hard to really notice much of a difference when it comes to this Sigma increase. So essential, and of course the 600 health increase from 36.9 to 37.5, the 600 health is basically nothing. It's one battleship overpen, which you're unlikely to even notice. So very much a Cleveland. So I figured, well, since we're covering this new and exciting, completely original premium here, I might as well kind of make a guide on positioning for light cruisers. The first thing you might note here is that even though I'm actually parked in the middle of the open and shooting, I'm using terrain. I'm using distance to the Bismarck. The Bismarck is too far away if you look at the minimap. He's too far away to spot me because of my limited range. And the Mogami and the Massachusetts are both behind islands. So even though I'm technically in the middle of the open, because of my positioning, I am completely undetected. I'm gonna try to see if we can, if the Mogami tries to turn out, then our AP might actually be pretty okay. First volley, what is his reaction going to be? I am spotted by the planes now, so of course we start accelerating. You want to be kiting away if that happens. His reaction is actually to turn in, so we switch to HE right after the second AP volley. If cruisers turn in, or if anything really turns in, like Cleveland AP, light cruiser AP in general is very limited use, and you only want to use it at pretty much point blank ranges. At any sort of longer ranges, just switch to HE. It's much more consistent. I threw one volley at the Massachusetts in between. You might wonder, why the hell did he throw one volley instead of keeping fire on the Mogami? The idea was I was hoping to get a quick fire. At these ranges, as you can see, it's quite easy to land a huge amount of shells. I'm landing 8-9 shells per volley, and the fire chance is actually fairly good when you land that many. So the idea was get a quick fire burning on him, hope he damage cons, and then get additional fires after we've shot at the Mogami for a bit. We do get our first fire though, but obviously we are kiting away. What you need to remember with the Cleveland and light cruisers is 25mm of armor, and that means you easily get overmatched by pretty much every battleship of your tier. And something like a Massachusetts with 406s can easily melt us. So we're kiting away, and we are just spamming this guy as we do. Keep in mind that I'm being targeted by a second person, so we need to keep an eye out on the minimap in case there's some incoming fire coming from the right. There's a Bismarck very far away and a Bayern fairly far away, and there's the shells. A bit risky, but honestly, they don't really have any pinpoint shooters. And for Bismarck to land really good volleys on a Cleveland at 20 kilometers, he needs a lot of very fortunate RNG. Now, maybe I think I should actually have angled a bit more just to play it safe, but if I'm not seeing some of those really big gun threats like an Amagi or a North Carolina, I kind of do enjoy playing a bit riskier. I don't recommend it though. I have to say I don't recommend it. I think that was still a mistake. That was basically greedy for damage, greedy to deal damage to this Massachusetts, and probably an unnecessary risk. So play safer than I did there. Do what I tell you, not what I do, basically. But using the terrain and kiting away, and basically just using the greatest strength that the light cruiser has, which is DPM, we've almost racked up 100,000 worth of damage already, and we're only about 6 minutes into the match. So it does show you just how much raw firepower you have at your fingertips. Now obviously a lot of this raw firepower relies heavily on speccing IFHE. Light cruisers, if they don't have IFHE, well, they rely almost entirely on RNG, that is fire chance, and you never want to be in a situation where you're completely RNG dependent. And for that reason, of course, IFHE is a must-have. In fact, the American light cruisers is some of the few cruisers where, or few ships where you actually spec something before you spec concealment expert. Usually concealment expert is one of the first choices, but on these light cruisers you go IFHE before you get concealment expert, because that consistent damage is even more important than your concealment and survivability. That's how much it adds to your damage. Mogami is coming out. We start shooting, and at the same time, of course, we start turning away, because if both the Edinburgh and the Mogami starts firing upon us, well, that's a lot of damage we don't really want to be eating. Mogami should be getting killed. The damage, of course, is really tremendous. And we start fires as well, so that Mogami is almost certainly going down. The Edinburgh didn't start shooting, in fact he's turning in, so we're turning in his way as well. Because if we look at the minimap, once again, you gotta keep an eye on the minimap. The Nelson, the Bayern, Richelieu, the Bismarck, they're all on the right side of the map. So they kind of left this part of the map open. And whenever a map is open, that means battleships have left it. It gives you so much freedom in a cruiser. Because you can just sail around them, you can basically just deal damage. Because there's none of those big threats that it just can instantly blap you. Getting some volleys in on the Edinburgh. He's still briefly spotted by being so close to the Sims. And now I'm waiting for my reload. Note that you don't want to panic radar. I'm gonna see if I can maybe get a fire with that volley. Okay, no fire. Now we pop radar. You don't want to panic with that stuff and pop it too early. And he's just within range as we forward. So we will easily be able to finish off this Edinburgh. Yes, he accelerates fast, but with so little health, it's not like I need to land many shells to secure this kill. Of course, one can question the idea of smoking up in front of a light radar cruiser. But in general, the damage we've taken so far isn't really too bad. We've only taken about 15k, but we have dealt a significant amount of damage, and more importantly, this entire left flank of the map is ours. It's pretty much clear of enemies. Now, why is this such an important thing to have a flank cleared? Because this opens up completely new positions for us. As long as this left flank is completely clear of enemies, it means I can use all the terrain in front of me, all this terrain on my right, I can use it as cover, as line of sight cover. And light cruisers, you don't want to be like a Cleveland, you don't want to be sailing out in the open, you don't want to be an open water gunboat. You have very slow shell arcs, you have almost no armor, 25mm of armor, everything overmatches you. You don't want to be in the open taking fair trades. That's not how this ship works. In fact, the ship is really bad at that. So what you want to be doing is, of course, using terrain as much as possible. Using line of sight cover. Those lazy arcs that we complain about, where they are especially good at lobbing shells over islands. So you want to find islands. You want to identify positions where you can use islands to your advantage to lob shells over at enemies who normally would be safe from any other kind of fire. Here we have a good example. Dallas pushing around the corner, Nelson pushing around the corner. Many ships would struggle to shoot out this, but this thing, of course, no such issues. A carrier is around, so I pop defensive AH, shoot down his planes, not just to help my turrets, but also to remove the spotting. That was the only thing keeping me spotted. Now, if you're having trouble landing shells above, like over islands the way I'm doing here, like I landed 10 shells in that volley out of 12. If you're having trouble landing those kinds of volleys, there's multiple tricks you can use. First of all, look at the minimap. There's a little circle that shows where your crosshair actually is pointing. So you can use that, place it in front of the ship, and you get a pretty good idea of where you should be aiming. Why am I targeting the Dallas? He's the closest one, he's the only one that can really fire back accurately at me, and he's probably the one who's going to be keeping me spotted as well. So I want to eliminate, and he's a low HP target as well, so eliminating this threat before we go back to the Nelson is a high priority. The Cleveland, on the other hand, even though he's also a light cruiser, is actually much further away. So he's going to struggle with those slow shells at 15 kilometers. If I just keep moving slightly back and forth, that Cleveland is going to struggle to get any sort of significant damage on me. And if he keeps moving forward, he'll actually move behind the island, which will leave me undetected here. Nelson gets a chunk in on us. He manages to thread the needle between that little gap, but the damage isn't really that big because, well, we're moving back and forth, so it's hard for him to get that perfect volley off. Now, I mentioned using the minimap. And then of course you can tap the M key. If you tap the M key, that is the map key. The game, if you press it once, you go into this top-down kind of view of the minimap. But if you tap it really quickly, meaning you go into the map view and you go back real fast, the camera actually starts the animation of going up and then cancels it. And you can use that to look over islands. And of course you can just aim your crosshair higher, which will also look above islands. But the map key is a pretty good way of getting that information. So, using that terrain, using the positioning, using the islands, we're able to pretty much finish off that Nelson without any issues. Of course, Nelson has very little armor, and he used his damage con on the fire early, so we were able to melt him very, very quickly. And that was our 4th kill, and we've already racked up a good 180k damage, trying to get rid of the Cleveland, because actually I should mention that I was spotted there. For some reason I was spotted there, and of course if you're spotted in a position that you should normally be safe in, it means that the only thing that can be spotting you is obviously a destroyer. My positioning is such that you can see all these ships are behind islands, and the Richelieu up in the north is also behind islands. So the only thing that could have possibly spotted me was obviously a destroyer. So as soon as that happens, I pop my radar, because it's very unlikely that he would be far enough away to not be caught by it, and I think I wasn't even shooting at the time, so basically my concealment was reset to the normal 9.3 km concealment, so the chance of catching him in the radar was very, very high. He tried to dodge behind the island, but of course, caught like that, it's very little you can do. So we're gonna try to use, once again, these islands as much as possible, use positioning. The Cleveland is pushing around this flank, and we need to get rid of him, because he will probably get a vision of us soon. Because I'm trying to basically keep all these ships behind these islands. I'm gonna have to reverse, because the Bayern is pushing, and as I reverse, I will get spotted by the Cleveland. But because we're getting so much damage in on him, we already have shells in the air, he should die very, very quickly. Oh, he barely survives the volley, but we got a fire he apparently can't repair, and the next volley will guaranteed kill him. But I am forced to turn out, and here we get an example of why you really don't want to be open water gunboating in this thing. Well, this guy, the Bayern, is shooting HE, which is of course a very, very questionable move, because he's got 380mm guns, just like the Bismarck, and those overmatch our armor. But once the Bismarck shows up, when he's actually shooting AP, you will see what happens to your health, even if you angle. Note how well I'm angled. I'm basically trying to the perfect angle so I can bounce on my broadside, but he doesn't actually hit my broadside, he just hits random parts of my ship, and it says critical damage and heavy damage, and we basically lose 10k health. And that's because our armor simply cannot bounce his shells. Unless he's hitting right on that citadel spot where we can bounce with, the rest of our armor is 25mm, which means Bismarck, Bayern, 380mm guns, Richelieu, basically all the ships that are left, completely ignore all our armor, and they just punch straight through it. Even the Richelieu is somehow able to shoot us, which means, of course, I don't know what my Tirpitz is doing up there, but probably not too much by the looks of it. And this means we have to stop firing at this point, because we've taken so many hits. Even overpens deal 1.3k, 1.2k to us, so we have to stop shooting, because 2 overpens right now would kill us. Our entire team has basically collapsed at this point. I want to reset the caps, I want to deal damage. One of these guys even damage con the fire, but the problem is if I shoot, I'm pretty much dead. So what we have to do is locate the next source of island cover. This is something you do, like leapfrog from island cover to island cover. In this case, I see the island in front of me as honestly the only safe option. If I try to push up into that gap, well, we're gonna get so close to the Richelieu. My hopes here is that my Tirpitz will be able to get something done, because I mean a Tirpitz should easily be able to outbrawl a Richelieu. He can just rush him. If the Richelieu turns away full broadside, that's citadels. If he tries to brawl close range, that's torpedoes. He's got all the cards, so I'm hoping my Tirpitz might get something done there. Just as I'm going behind the island though, I am gonna throw out some shells, because the cap is already more than half done, so I need to get resets on the Bismarck. The Bayern is shooting, but we're already almost behind the island, and we're gonna throw a volley at him as well, trying to get resets on him. We managed to reset the Bismarck, which takes it down another notch. And the shells in the air on the Bayern actually look pretty okay. and we managed to get a reset on him as well. So we bought ourselves more time. Well, we bought our turpits more time to get something done. Since both the carrier and the turpits are working together there, my hopes are that they will get something done. As now I finally have some island cover to work with, I can stop, I can reverse, and see if we can maybe start spamming shells on these guys. The problem is the Bayern and Bismarck aren't actually interested in just securing the cap, they're just pushing through to kill us. Which is, of course, the correct decision, even though they are points in the lead, it limits my options greatly. I can't just sit behind the island and spam because they're just constantly pushing my way, and Cleveland doesn't really have any strong methods, any strong tools of dealing with ships that are pushing into you. There's no torpedoes, there's no significant tools. Carrier tries to go and kill me with a quick, cheeky little attack plane squad, but I see it coming on the minimap and pop defensive AA. Of course, I already have my sector on the right side to make sure that, because that's where the carrier was, so I knew which way he would come from. So with the defensive AA, I can quickly shred his planes. I know we're gonna die at this point. What I'm hoping is that my carrier will angle and I can maybe use him as bait. He hits the first volley from the Richelieu, there's the first volley, and then I can deal damage to him. But sadly, our carrier was basically sitting still full broadside. He wasn't even moving, so he gets devastated instantly. I do some good damage to this guy, but honestly at this point it's over because, well, the Bismarck is also within secondary range. You see that chip damage coming in. His secondaries alone will easily melt me. He doesn't even need to land any shells. And as predicted, the secondaries do finish us off and the game does end. So, well, a bit of a sad ending there, but 230,000 damage, and of course it is, the Montpelier is a tier 8 premium, so we do make about 1 million worth of credits here. 6 kills, 5 planes shot down, some resets, 18 fires. Now once again, this is very much a Cleveland. Do I recommend the ship? If you really like the Cleveland, you'll really like the ship. If you really hate the Cleveland, you'll really hate this ship. So I think this is a very easy decision to make. This is a very easy ship to recommend. Do you like American light cruisers? If you pick yes, the ship is for you. If you pick no, the ship is not for you. It might not be unique, but at least it's very easy to recommend and very easy to categorize. The good parts of the positives of it is of course that it's a light cruiser trainer, meaning you can use the same captain as you use on the Boise, on the Atlanta, on the Flint, on the Worcester, basically the light cruiser line. You can use that same captain on this ship as well. So if the Boise doesn't do it for you, or if the Atlanta isn't your thing and you want a slightly higher tier one, well, now there's the Montpelier, which is obviously a good ship. I mean, Cleveland isn't a bad ship. Cleveland is absolutely a good ship. People just often struggle to utilize terrain accurately or well in it to the extent that they are able to utilize the firepower as well. Team score wise, of course, tells a bit of a depressing story. 6 kills, which is of course half the entire enemy team. But the enemy team still had 4 ships left, which means of course the rest of my team only managed to kill 2. So this ended up being a bit of a steamroll towards the end because, well, the game is difficult to carry at times. That's really what it comes down to. And finally, of course, we have the detailed report, which 162,000 HE, very little AP. I tried to get one opportunity to use it, but you notice how heavily I use the HE instead, because it's simply more consistent. And with IFHE, it always deals that damage. And more importantly, you have a chance of setting fires. And in fact, if we look at our fires, 64,000 fire damage, which is of course a wither worth of damage. So this game would have obviously been a high caliber Confederate Kraken with probably even an arsonist on the Nelson or any other ship. So very high damage potential. Once again, well, maybe a bit less than the Cleveland. You got to remember this thing has a 7-second reload versus Cleveland's 6.5. So a bit, but it has better dispersion. So a bit of a trade-off there. If you consider it worth it, honestly, I don't think the difference is really that big that you'll pay too much attention to it while playing. Damage taken, of course, well, we were facing a bunch of battleships that overmatched our armor, so it's hardly surprising that 14 AP hits was more than enough to kill us. I can show you guys my recommended build, but I'm pretty sure I'm just running a basic Worcester build. I'm almost certain, but I'll show it anyway since people will probably want to see it. Right, module-wise, there's not too much to talk about because you can't really change any. Well, the UI doing the tactical little freezing there. There we go. Upgrade-wise, priority one number one is of course damage con, followed by radar, and I would honestly say hydro and defensive AA because, well, usually you need defensive AA only a handful of times, whereas hydro is very useful to have available. Upgrade-wise, turret survival, rudder survival. I'm running the better dispersion, but honestly I can't say I noticed much. In general, I don't recommend this. This was more to test the Sigma improvements on the Montpelier to see if it was really worth using. So honestly, AA gun mods is just... You don't really, you can't tell the difference, whereas the AA improvement is significant. Acceleration module, of course, because your maneuverability is very good. In general, on a cruiser, if I have rudder shift this fast, especially on an island hugger like the Cleveland, I think acceleration mod is just better, because if someone is aiming at you, you suddenly get spotted, being able to accelerate and dodge out of the way, or a DD rushes you, or whatever, I find this thing to be much more useful. And finally, of course, concealment. Captain perks wise, this looks like my Worcester captain. Hey, what a surprise. So, priority target, adrenaline rush, superintendent, IFHE. That's the order of importance. You want to get IFHE first. Once you have IFHE, you go concealment expert into preventive. Concealment expert, actually, you don't really need preventive maintenance that much. So probably manual AA. I think this is my old build, my old Worcester build that I haven't really bothered respecking. So I would say, let's say mid-range. Your mid-range is pretty okay. With short range is actually very good. For the short range alone, I would recommend getting manual AA. You gotta remember, of course, manual AA, the way it works is, it only gives you AA sector reinforcement. And the way AA sector reinforcement works is it only increases the continuous damage. So if you're deciding whether or not you want manual AA, you have to look at that continuous damage. So not the damage per second within a shell's explosion, but the continuous damage below it. And those are the values that are being buffed. Usually long range has very little. Mid range can be okay. It can be pretty decent, but usually the short range is what really benefits from the manual AA and in general the sector reinforcement. So especially battleships benefit quite heavily from this because they tend to have very high values. I can show you an example. Well, we can show, for example, the Kreml, which is another upcoming ship. You can see the mid-range 666 and the short range 907. So on ships like this, of course, getting 25% extra damage on the short range is massive. So use that to decide whether or not you think it's worth it. Personally, I think manual AA would probably be better here than the AFT flak damage increase. So that would be, and then the final point into preventive maintenance. Flag-wise, I'm probably running tryhard flags for the sake of the commentary, but in general you want to run the fire flags because you spam a lot of HE, so increasing your fire chance is worth it. Speed, you're fairly slow. Faster consumable usage, you got a lot of them. These two are very... neither of these two are necessary. You don't really suffer from fires. I'm just running it because I have so many. You don't really suffer from detonations. I'm just running it because I was testing the ship and didn't feel like detonating while doing it. The AA flag, however, is quite nice to run on a cruiser since the Cleveland has great AA. Anyway, that was my Montpelier preview. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a Cleveland. I'll talk to you later.